Hello and welcome to Positive Leadership, the podcast that helps you grow as an individual, as a leader, and ultimately as a global citizen. Today's guest is an entrepreneur and a philanthropist whose work has transformed millions of lives across the globe. Born into a family rooted in generosity and purpose, he grew up across 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and the US, gaining a unique perspective on leadership and responsibility. As the founder of the Clearly campaign, he's addressing the overlooked issue of uncorrected provision, a condition affecting over 1 billion people worldwide. His family's foundation, the Chen Yet-Sen Family Foundation, focuses on enhancing access to learning and development opportunities for all. Over the past 15 years, the foundation has championed early childhood literacy and vision correction, taking bold and calculated risk to test and scale unconventional ideas. His concept of moonshot philanthropy and his willingness to privatize failure while socializing success have redefined how we approach global challenges. It's an honor to welcome James Chen to the show. James, a warm thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, JP. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, James, let's start with where I always love to start with my guests, which is basically your roots. Can you please share with us a little bit more about your early life and, where you are born, your family influence as well, and the background that kind of shaped you?
So I was born in Hong Kong, but at the age of 3, my parents moved me to be with them in Nigeria, where our family business was and continues to be located. So in that very early time, so this would have been 1964, I made the trip from Hong Kong via Europe. In those days, you may be old enough as me that there were lots of stops along the way, and then we would transit in Europe to go to Africa. So it was such an exciting experience then. I then spent 7 years going to elementary school in Nigeria, in Lagos. And after that, my parents sent me actually to a boarding school in the UK, a Jesuit boarding school, by the way.
Okay.
And then in 1974, my parents emigrated to the US, and so I joined them and spent the next 15 years studying and working in the US before returning at the age of 29 to Hong Kong, where I've been based since.
Wow, what a global citizen. Any memories you have, James, from your early days and childhood in Nigeria? Because I'm sure that living in Nigeria at that time, it's not Lagos of today, must have been a very particular experience.
Yeah, it's it was a really I think that it was a very unusual experience. Of course, I went to a expatriate school, so from a very early age, mixed with children from all over the world, and probably the thing that was striking was that every other year in those days we would get to go back to Hong Kong for leave, and we would my mother in particular always made it a point for us to spend time in Europe. Between going from Africa to Hong Kong or Hong Kong to Africa. And so at that early age, being able to, it kind of, in those days at the two ends, whether it's Hong Kong or Africa, it was very developing world, right? And then in the middle was this developed, Europe. And then, so having the experience of experiencing, all the different societies and cuisines, of course. And,
yes.
It was very, I think, a very broad experience, which I really relished. Yeah.
Really fascinating, particularly as a kid, as a child. So I know philanthropy has been a cornerstone of your family, right, for 3 generations. Your father, Robert Yet-Sen Chen, overcame war, poverty, and famine to establish an international business enterprise and ultimately building schools, hospitals, and funding much needed public works in the hometown of Qidong in China. And so we can thus imagine, your father was instrumental in shaping your values, I guess, and approach to philanthropy. So can you share more about your family background? I mean, all the way to your granddad,
Yeah.
who I think was instrumental, and the lessons you learned growing up with them.
Well, yeah. I'm very blessed and lucky to be a third generation of a business family that has had a business operation in in Asia, and then in Africa, and so it's really aside from my kind of personal journey,
Yeah.
I think for the family, it's been a very amazing opportunity to I guess, like for my grandfather, he grew up. He actually only went uh, uh, to primary school, and then went to walked 70 kilometers to Shanghai, got a job in the enamelware factory, and then kind of very much, a lot of ups and downs, but basically made well, did well in the industry, and then over the years, for someone who was only had a primary school education, then he left China, before the revolution. So had this geopolitical sense, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting that in those days, actually, a lot of families who left Shanghai in the 47 to 49 period, then when they got to Hong Kong, they actually did not enjoy. They thought it was a very backward place compared to the very cosmopolitan Shanghai. And between 1949 and 52, many families went back to Shanghai, and then the bamboo curtain or the iron curtain came down in 52, right? So they were trapped in it. Luckily for me, my grandfather, didn't do that, and then he actually went to Indonesia, set up a factory, did quite well, but then saw that there was again geopolitical problems with the Chinese, ethnic Chinese. So he cut his losses, or he repatriated most of the capital at a bit of a loss, and that's when he decided to go to Africa with my father, who then was studying in England. Again, my grandfather didn't speak any English, so my father did, and so the two of them went to Africa. They explored and decided to open a sales office in Khartoum, in Sudan, to first grow the sales and then open a factory. So the first factory in Africa for our family was in Khartoum, Sudan, and then replicated that in Ghana, and Nigeria was only the third replication of that strategy. But of course, over the years, then Nigeria became with the largest population and with oil revenues became kind of the center of our business.
I mean, it's pretty amazing in terms of the entrepreneurship mindset, I guess, right, of your granddad and dad, because moving from China, Hong Kong, Indonesia to Africa was probably not an easy decision to make, particularly if you don't speak any English. So why? I mean, how did he decide such a radical decision for his family, right, as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think this is a very, I'm not sure, it's not an uncommon thing for the Chinese diaspora, you can find Chinese expats in the most amazing places. So a story I can share is in the early 80s, we bought a business in a very remote part of Brazil. And when we went there, of course, all being Chinese, you look for, is there a Chinese restaurant? There turned out to be not just one, but 3 Chinese restaurants. And the best one happened to be a guy who came from the same village as my dad. In remote Brazil. So I think that that's been the history of the Chinese diaspora, right? Is that willingness to take risk. In his day, my father actually didn't have much of a choice. His dad said, right, this looks good, go and make it work.
When you reflect on the legacy of getting your family, dad, granddad, I mean, which values would you elevate, James, as defining values for yourself personally in your life?
Well, I would say, for the business side, I actually have not been very much involved because the family
Yeah.
always felt that they didn't know how long, with the experience they had in China and in Indonesia, they never knew, very volatile
Yes.
developing world countries. So they discouraged myself and my cousins from
Hmm.
ever considering the family business as a career, right, option.
Okay.
And so, so that's I've not been actively involved in the business operation, but it is with my dad when he retired in the 80s.
Hmm.
Um, he then went, as you mentioned, he went back to his hometown
Yes.
where he experienced famine as a child,
Yes.
and felt like very strong need to give back and kind of do better for the hometown, for people in the hometown. And so you know he and the big lesson I learned from
Hmm.
him there was that unlike a lot of his peers, who
Yeah.
also went back to give back, uh, many of them would just think about writing the check, right? But
Yes.
they didn't really put much effort to thinking what's the real need
Yeah.
and how do you do this well or better. But my dad really rolled up his sleeves,
Hmm.
spent a lot of time on trying to understand what the need is, right? And worked with the locals, and I
Community.
think
Hmm.
his philanthropy was therefore much success. So I
Yeah.
came into this with this idea that it's not just about the money, it's about effort, right? To understand what is it that we can do given our fortunate circumstances.
And it's about the way you give back as well to the
That's
community
right.
that you belong to. So,
Yeah.
as you talk about that, could you paint for us the picture of Kidong as a city
Yeah.
at the time? Maybe if you can
Yeah. It was
recall,
yes.
or what was it like, and why did your dad pick some areas of impact in that city?
So he was so when I first went there in 1991, to get there from Shanghai was a 7-hour journey. Okay,
Hmm.
just about 75 kilometers. But you had to take a river ferry and bumpy roads and all. So it
Yeah.
took 7 hours to get there.
Oh,
And when we got there, there was no street lights. The hotel, they switched off the hot water heater at 6 p.m. You
yeah.
know, and when they you did have water, the color came out quite funny. It's all
Yeah.
so that was the situation, right? And so
Yeah.
there was a real need there, and so my father, as I said, really stepped in and did a lot of work there, which I think the community was very grateful for,
Hmm.
and it really set us into something that when my dad in the late 90s said, I'm tired, I'm
Hmm.
done, I felt like it would be a shame to not continue
To let continue.
this great
Yeah.
thing that he had done, right? But
Yes. Yeah.
but of course, I would do it. I felt, being young and brash, I had different ideas. I'd gone to conferences
Yeah. Yeah.
about, family values and philanthropy.
Yeah.
And so it was very much about doing it in a more methodical, shall we say, way.
Yeah, we'll get there actually, James, in a few minutes. But before we get there, I'd like us to make a little pause about actually your family business. I think which was a manufacturing business, right?
Yes, yes,
In different operations across the world. Uh, so I understand you are still the chairman, right, of this holding, family holding called Wahom Group,
Wahoo. Yeah,
and also the CEO of the family office, and of course leading all the philanthropic work of your
yeah,
family, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken. I'd like to ask you how much interdependence you see, and how much leverage or not between the three components, right, of your family legacy: the
Yeah.
business, the philanthropy, the family office, all the assets of the family. How does it work, and how do you and do you have you defined actually some shared values and principles to oversee the management of all of that together? It's a big question.
So yes, yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I'm actually not. While I'm the chairman, I don't have a management responsibility.
Yes, good.
So that makes it easier in terms of my
Simpler. Yeah,
bandwidth, right?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but I did grow up literally, off our home in Nigeria, is literally right across the factory, right?
Yeah.
And so I grew up, where at lunches or dinners, whether it was people from the company or
Yeah.
suppliers or customers would come for lunch and dinner, and there's a lot of talk around the dinner table. So
Yeah.
I grew up with this dream that this is an amazing thing to be doing, right?
Mm.
And so I always had dreams of being entrepreneur.
Mm.
Uh, uh, but what then I found later, after starting on my own career, was that I'm actually really not a good entrepreneur, not a good businessman,
Mm.
and so and that I'm very lucky that our family has the wealth that then
Yeah.
my my main mission is to ensure that I'm a good steward to the family fortune, right?
Got you.
And so that was the kind of
Yes.
my first
Yes.
step to help the family, was to set up the family office.
I got you,
And
which
this
is
was
new. Yeah.
in the early '90s, where
Okay.
probably in Hong Kong I was the first
One of the
official
first
family
ones
office.
to do that. And
Yeah.
did you decide quickly to formalize again your foundation work at the time out of that family office as well?
Well, that came a little bit later uh, in the after the late '90s, as I
Mm.
mentioned. So it was important, the I've heard some of your previous guests speak
Yes.
about reinventing their
Right.
own selves, right? And that's kind of what I've done. I started coming out of college. I worked
Yeah.
at an insurance company,
Mm.
which in investment accounting,
Mm.
which actually many years later helped me in setting up a family office, right? I
Mm. Of
had the
course.
kind of an understanding of investment accounting that really helped out. Then I went to business school and quit to open a restaurant, okay, in New York
Mm.
City,
Mm.
against the wishes of my father, who then was so annoyed with me, he actually changed his will to say,
Really?
if my son does not get a master's degree, that he will not inherit anything from me.
Anything.
Okay, and but I was headstrong and said I know better, and I went ahead anyway, and had what I would call a a critical success. We're very
Mm.
busy in this
Yes.
restaurant, but financially it turned out to be a failure. And so
Sorry, Jim, what kind of cuisine was it, that restaurant, just by
it was
curiosity?
it was the name of the restaurant was called Good Enough to Eat, and it was a New England country cooking. So I
Okay.
was instead of going to my classes at Columbia Business School, I would make a detour and eat at this lovely little place, and got to know the owners,
Yeah.
and we decided to open a downtown version that was larger, and so yeah, so that's kind of you can see that was
Yeah.
my attempt at entrepreneurial. But then with the failure, I
Yes.
think that really
Mm.
at that early age, it really drove in that lesson to say, you know, you, uh, uh, you're maybe not as smart and
Mm.
certainly not as good a manager as you think you are. And so, the humility of having
Mm.
that early failure really helped me to,
Yeah.
again, as I say, really appreciate that I'm blessed to have had this, the legacy of of a family
Of
business
the family.
that's generated the family wealth.
Yeah, wow, a lot of fascinating experiences you had along the way. Now, I'd like to come back again to the inception of your family foundation with your dad, right, Robert Yet-Sen Chen. Why did he decide to, I think, create the foundation in the first place?
Well, he didn't think to create the foundation. This is, he did it, very, you know, opportunistically,
Okay.
and with very little structure, right? But
Yes.
again, as I said, when I got involved, I came in with all these ideas about,
Mm.
from going to all these uh, conferences and so forth. And so I said, we should
Yep.
really formalize this and really be deliberate and think through what it is that we're doing, right? And
So
to think about impact and so forth. And therefore, set up this structure and named it,
yeah.
after my father, which, coincidentally, it was the document that put that
Yes.
Chen Yet-Sen Family Foundation to existence was
Mm.
the last document he ever signed in his life.
Wow.
We didn't
Wow.
know it at the time. We didn't
Wow.
realize he was that sick, but
Wow.
shortly after he passed away. Yeah. So there's
Wow. That,
something very sentimental to me about that
of
also.
course, very, very special and a very special sense as well of your destiny, I guess, James, with your family. I think you explained in media that it was while you were standing in a library, actually in Kidong, right, financed by your father, that the light bulb moment happened to you. So, can you tell us what was this light bulb moment? What happened?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that very much relates to this early childhood literacy.
Yeah.
When we had first started the foundation, one of the interesting we hired a consultant to help us, and she one of the things she said to my family was, so what is it that you're interested in supporting?
Yeah.
And that turned out to be a really interesting question
Hmm.
because uh, I before that I had always thought that my parents, my sister, and I, had very similar ideas.
Yes.
And it was only when we sat down to try and discuss it that I realized, wow, all four of us had very different ideas.
Hmm.
And in fact, those meetings ended up with my sister and I, like having heated arguments,
Yes.
talking about things like, when we were 6 years old, mom and dad was, like favoring you and I got the short term thing, so, and it was really unproductive, right?
Yes.
And I think the reason why that happened was because, uh, uh, you know, we, we didn't have any data, right? We didn't know what
Hmm.
was out there, what it is that we could do that could make
Yes.
a difference, right? And so everyone has the ideas, but there's nothing to bring it together, right? And it's only afterwards this consultant said, you know what, this is unproductive, so let's just focus on the things we don't want to do. And so we zeroed in on kind of generally education, as many, I think,
Yeah.
early, family philanthropy would go into education. And so that's
Yes.
kind of where we started.
Yeah.
And particularly since my dad had,
Yeah.
the experience with setting up schools. But when we did it, it was much more of, by that time, China was already starting to boom. And I felt that it was not about building, hardware. And it was
Yes.
really thinking about the software of how do you,
Hmm.
what's a quality education, and that's how we got into libraries, and when we first put in our first library in the local school, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, uh, Previous to that, that library, when we went in, there was all these mostly empty shelves, and what books there were
Hmm.
teacher training manuals and things that were of no interest to the children, right? So
Hmm.
we put in, we had a committee formed of parents, teachers,
Yeah.
and children, right?
Yeah.
And then they picked 500 books, and we
Hmm.
put that in, and then there was a line out the door of kids
Hmm.
wanting to check out those books, right?
The
And they put
books. Yeah.
themselves on, and that's the light bulb moment. It's like, of course,
That's
if
what
you
we
have the
do.
books that they want to
Yeah.
read,
Yes.
they're eager to read, right?
Yes.
And so that's what got the Family Foundation to start on this journey on early childhood literacy, which, by the way, that's still the core
Still
uh,
do.
uh,
Yeah.
uh, activity for the foundation, right?
Yes.
And something that was separate
Yeah.
with the vision journey.
And we'll get to the vision, John. I just wanted as well to extend a bit of discussion, James, on libraries and books, because interestingly enough, I'm sure many of our listeners know that books and libraries and reading have been always an inspiration for some of the biggest philanthropists in the world. As a matter of fact, in US, Carnegie, as you know well, is widely recognized the most influential philanthropist in library funding. I think between 1883 and 1929, he funded the construction of 2,500 libraries worldwide. And then, of course, Bill Gates, which I know well, and Melinda Gates Foundation started their early work at the foundation with libraries in the US as well, and so on and so forth. So I even had actually a wonderful guest like you, James, on that podcast 2 years ago called Rana Dajani. Rana Dajani is a professor of molecular biology at the Hashem University of Jordan, but she's also the founder of an NGO called We Love Reading, which I don't know if you have heard about We Love Reading. It's a pretty big NGO that she set up in Jordan, but that is now actually having an impact across 70 countries. And the concept is based on butterfly effect, which is it's about reading loudly books with women to kids in small communities to empower both the women and then the kids to learn, to get educated, to stand up and take care of their lives. That's kind of the summary. So it's interesting to me. I'd like to ask you, why do you think reading actually keeps being still today a vital force for empowering, again, people across the world? And additional thought, do you see the fast growing role of AI jumping now into technology when it comes to learning, reading, and reasoning through books as well?
So for us, while we started with just this very simple idea of books and libraries, now we're 15 plus years later, the foundation is now really working on the love of reading and the habit of reading, right? Yeah. To encourage children from a very early age to develop this interest and love of reading, right? And this is something that I think the research has shown that the best thing that a parent can do for a child, forget all these tutoring classes and whatever, all these other things, by really nurturing the children to appreciate and enjoy, reading and stories, it really stimulates their imagination and allows them to explore, right? For themselves. Most importantly, I think it's for themselves is their particular journey. There's so much, knowledge and information. None of us can really absorb it all. But, if we are passionate about a certain subject, right, and pursue that and really get deep into it, that's kind of the way. And it really, so what we are really trying to encourage is this lifelong habit of reading, right? Yes. Which we think is a fundamental thing for children or adults, anywhere in
Absolutely.
the world. Yeah.
And do you see any big change happening again because of generative AI maybe coming to the game and conversing with the kids, at least the kids who have access, of course, to ChatGPT or
I think it's a double-edged sword, right? I don't know too much. I'm sure there are others who know a lot more about AI, generative AI, that could comment on this. But from my perspective, it's very much that it's a double-edged sword. It's good in that it really enables any human individual, right? It gives you this incredible tool that broadens your perspective, right? But it also has, I think, potentially that risk of having you not learn critical thinking and creativity, right? And that drive, right, to dig in, to really roll up your sleeves, as we say, and figure it out for yourself, right? When it's so easy and it comes, when you just type something in. And I think that's the struggle that we need to kind of find that right balance to say it's a tool, it's an amazing tool, it needs to be, but we want to make sure that the kids grow up being able to do, critical thinking.
Absolutely.
And so, no, I'm not sure that anyone has the right formula if there is one, but certainly that's the tension that I would see.
But I'm with you, James, that certainly giving the appetite and the curiosity to read more, to learn more by your own efforts is so critical to develop your own critical thinking later on. And with AI, you need to make sure that you open up your mind to really comprehend many forms of opinions, and reading is a wonderful way to start doing all of that. Now, I'd
Yes.
like now to move on and really get to the discovery of the big cause you've been going after for many years of your life now, James, which is, of course, vision. And I'd love you to start by telling us what has been the other light bulb moment where you decided that you saw the world through the vision issue, right? We
Yeah.
talked about reading, we talked about libraries, and now you decided one day, well, actually, there's a huge problem that I love our foundation to address. How did that start?
Well, I would say that, I think it definitely relates to the work we were doing with early childhood literacy. And it was very, meaningful to not only to myself, but to particularly at the time my mother and my sister and my wife, right?
Yep.
So we're all very involved in early childhood literacy and you know, we've been supporting and continue to support it, going on 20 years now. And when we've learned so much and we're able to be more enlightened and try to do kind of things in a more enlightened way, right?
Mm.
And that's and I guess that was the thing because 20, 18, 20 years ago, I was much younger and having this positive experience, I said, but I guess, this is fantastic, but it's really, our focus was very constrained to
Yep.
China, to particularly mainland China, but also the greater China with
Hmm.
Hong Kong,
Yep.
of Taiwan and the Chinese diaspora. So it's kind of limited to that one culture. And kind
Mm.
of the back of my mind, I guess, because I grew up, as a global citizen, right?
Yes.
I thought, hey, it would be, I'm young enough and I perhaps have some resources that I can bring to bear to really
Mm.
try and make a difference on another issue that
Globally.
maybe has global significance.
Mm.
So with that kind of mindset,
Yep.
you know, of course, the mind is amazing. You come through so much stimuli and ideas, and you tend to filter it out, right? But with that kind of focus, then I was zoomed in when someone introduced me to this idea. Actually, showed me this idea of a pair of adjustable powered lenses, right?
Mm.
Uh, Invented by an Oxford physics professor. That kind of the light went off in my head again. It's like, okay, again, having the experience growing up, in Africa,
Yep.
uh, and then working for a large part of my adult career in developing Asia,
Yep.
it struck me that so few people wore glasses, right?
Glasses.
And it
That's
was
right.
kind of in the back of my, because I needed glasses since I was a
Yes.
teenager. And so, is it because that they didn't need glasses or is it because they don't have access to it?
They
Of
couldn't
course,
afford
now,
it.
yeah,
Yes. Mm.
well, yeah, they couldn't afford it, or what was the barrier, right?
Yep.
And so that's the journey that I've taken
Mm.
over, another 20-year journey, right? And this is the essence of moonshot, right? Which
Yes.
is these long journeys focused on a single issue.
Yep.
That the key to a moonshot for me, is the ability to be able to deploy high
Mm.
risk taking capital, right?
Mm.
And then to stick with the issue so you develop your own domain expertise
Yes.
in that issue, right? And to do that, it really takes a lot of perseverance and dealing with setbacks and failures, but continue to hold the course, which
Yes.
isn't easy. But again, very fortunately for me, that's turned out to be, so far it's been a very rewarding experience.
And we'll go through some of the steps together, James, and
Yeah.
we'll come back to this moonshot discussion, which I think I found extremely exciting, inspiring as well when it comes to philanthropy. But first of all, I'd like you to frame for listeners the vision issue in the world. What is it? What is it that you are really trying to address? How are you defining the problem, right, that you are going after in a
Yeah.
systemic way?
So glasses is a technology that was invented 700 years ago, right? And yet, today, there are over 1 billion people in the world who struggle, with blurry vision, right?
Yeah.
And for so many of that over 1 billion people, all they need is a pair of glasses, right, to
Correct.
correct that problem. And so that was the starting point of this journey to say, hey, I have been lucky to have access to this, and I know that, when I take it off, it's blurry. When I put it on, it's clear,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so, how big a difference. I mean, in fact, when I first discovered I have a problem with vision was when I was in high school in upstate New York. And I went to, as a 15-and-a-half-year-old, you can apply for your driving, kind of permit, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
of course, you had to take an eye test, and I failed
Yes.
the eye test. And that's when I discovered that I actually had an eye problem,
Yeah. Problem.
vision
Yes.
problem. And
Yeah.
then getting the glasses, like, wow, I can see so much clearer. And
Right.
so that's made such a, and so, I would have been, if I didn't wear my glasses, I was driving a car, I'd be a danger not only to myself, to everyone on the road,
Anyone.
right, around me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it was this kind of, coming across a professor who had this, technology that could adjust the power of the lens. It,
Yeah.
it struck me that, wow, this should be able to at the least simplify the distribution problem, because in the developing world, as we have had businesses in developing countries, one
Yes.
of the key difficulties is distribution, right? And
Yes.
so trying to, the traditional model of, when you get an eye test, in a developed world, you go to the shopping mall, you get an eye test, then they make a customized
Yeah.
lenses for you, right? So it's like customized, for
Yes.
every individual. And so obviously that's not doable in the developing world, right? So having
Yes.
these adjustable lenses, I felt, this is a big kind of barrier that you've broken through, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I felt keen to take this issue on and see how far I could run with it.
And so to be clear, because I know when sometimes we discuss eyesight issues, it's not about blindness, which is
That's
of
right.
course a subset,
That's
I
right.
mean the extreme
Yes.
subset, of course, of people who cannot see at all. But do
Yes.
you include that in your vision as well, or do you
Yes,
focus on?
indeed.
You do,
Yes,
right?
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
So it's kind of the Big Ten. But and historically, when whatever little kind of aid was available in vision sector, it was always to targeted towards blindness, to
Right.
cataracts and glaucoma and
Yeah.
kind of serious diseases, right? Because at the time, uh, the aid community, and the professionals thought that's something we can do something about.
Right.
But because, glasses and distribution and then testing of eyes was so, complicated and expensive and not scalable, right? So therefore, we could never reach the bottom of the pyramid in the developing world country. And so that turned out to be the problem I had to solve first,
To
right?
solve. Yeah. So let's go to this problem and explore this problem, James, because can you tell us the very specific set of initiative that you've been running over the years and now to go and provide, I guess, eyes to many more people in the world? How does it work? What does your foundation fund, both from not just from I would say, a philanthropic standpoint, maybe from an innovation standpoint as well, in
Yeah.
terms of glasses, eyes wells, etc. Tell us more about that,
Yeah.
please.
So it's probably something that it's unexpected, because the journey I've undertaken has gone in such different ways than in the 18, 20 years ago when I first started. I could not imagine today how that journey developed, right? But again, the starting point was I felt like I was blessed and lucky to have, to be able to support myself and my family without having to hold down, you know,
Yeah,
a job per se, right? I mean,
yeah,
my day job is running a family office, but
yeah,
after I built a team, they can run it and I get involved, but I don't have to spend a lot of my time. I can manage my time around it. So it
yeah,
gave me the excess time, bandwidth to be able to then spend and say, do something, worthwhile. And for me, and to have the capital, right, to say, hey, you know, I have this capital, which of course it's to try and make a difference, but it's really in the beginning it was very much to learn, right? So that's why I invested in the adjustable eyewear business,
Yes.
and then we went to the World Bank and we thought, hey, we make the glasses, they can fund the rollout, right?
Yes.
But it turned out, that we hit a brick wall, right? Right. And why? It's because at the time, when the development world, they thought of, when you talk vision, they always thought, health, right?
Yes.
But within the health silo, right, blurry vision is at the bottom of the list of priorities, right?
Of
If you're the
course.
health minister of a developing country, you've got like 170 different really important things to do, HIV, malaria,
Yeah.
child malnutrition, so many things. So it seems like someone with not blindness, right, but blurry vision seems it's not worth the effort,
Not
right?
important. Yeah.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
important, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's why we didn't get where we anywhere. So we said, and of course the professional eye community at the time also thought, you know, we know we can't do anything. It's too complicated. Having
Yeah.
to do an eye test, you need to train someone in a university for 4 or 5 years to be an optometrist to then give you that eye test, and then you have to make the glasses and then distribute it, to some remote part of a. So it's not feasible, right?
Yeah.
And so, we then said, you know what, maybe they're right, but that's where I think having maybe the capital, but more importantly, I think the stubbornness to say, you know what, is that really to question? Why not? Why is it that they really don't need? Is it really that you can't do this? And so, very fortuitously, we picked the country of Rwanda, right?
Wonder.
Rwanda, and then we set up an NGO called Vision for a Nation,
Yes.
and as the name implies, our goal was to bring vision to the nation of Rwanda, which at the time was one of the poorest countries in
In
the
the world.
world, right?
Yes.
And coming out of the genocide and so forth, and so we went in there. Yeah.
And so yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I was going to ask you. And so, what were you able to accomplish in Rwanda in a few years? Maybe just to give us
Yeah.
a sense of the scale of the problem in Rwanda and what you could achieve through your
Okay.
foundation.
So so
Actually,
so
yeah.
when we went in, as I said, the professional eye community thought this cannot be done, right? So in fact, there's an organization called the IAPB, International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness.
Yes.
We, Vision for a Nation, applied to be a member. We were rejected because they said, what is this guy? He's got money. He's got, he's not a professional. He doesn't understand. This is going to fail. So we don't
Yeah.
want to be involved with somebody doing this, right?
Yeah.
And so, but then, in about 8 years, we were able to then show that actually we could do it. And how did we do it? So instead of, 4 years of training an optometrist, right, we were able to develop a protocol to train nurses. So Rwanda has a universal health system.
Yes.
At that point, they had 500
Yeah.
health centers, and we trained 4 nurses in every health center to do a good enough, not perfect screening, right?
Just
Which they
like
could do.
just like the restaurant name, right? Good enough.
Good enough, yeah. But good enough to eat. Good enough. That's the first time someone mentioned it. Good enough, but not perfect. But this is one of the things, right? I
Yeah.
think particularly in the medical community, right?
Yeah.
It's they always strive to deliver perfection, right?
Yeah.
Perfection has a price, but
Yes.
if you say no, we just want to solve for functionality, not perfection,
Yeah.
right? That actually simplifies. And so we were able to train these nurses in 3 days to do a good enough, not perfect screening. And then they were able to dispense glasses, which we sold to the people for $1.50 a pair.
Super
Okay.
cheap. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this program, and it was working with the Rwandan government, particularly the. I was very, very lucky. We were very lucky that the first meeting we had with the Rwandan government was the permanent secretary of Ministry of Health, Dr. Agnes Binagwaho. She heard our plan, and she said, "That's a good idea. I will support it." Then a few months later, she became appointed the Minister of Health. And she was very instrumental, exactly, in being able to help us with some of the difficult breakthroughs. Having the right local champion really, really is one of the keys to success. Yeah.
Wonderful story. And do you have on top of your mind how many people you actually helped having access to?
So when we trained these nurses, we had this idea. We train the nurses. They're the health centers. We do a media campaign and drive traffic into the health centers, right? And that completely failed, right? It is the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. They didn't come. Then it's like, oh my God, what do we do? So then we said, okay, you know what? We're going to send these nurses to every one of the 15,000 villages in Rwanda.
Wow.
Okay, which we did, right? And in a space of about 3 years. And so by the end of the program in 2017, we had trained 2,700 nurses. We had tested the vision of 2.5 million of the 12 million population of Rwanda. We had actually I think dispensed about 1 million eye drops. A lot of people just had this allergic reaction, so all they needed were eye drops. But then we sent 100,000 people who had serious eye diseases to the doctors, right? And then about 200,000 people got glasses, right? Which 80% bought for $1.50, 20% who were the poorest of the poor, they got it for free.
That's amazing. And I think, it's wonderful that you told the story, because this is, I guess, the base by which you created that framework that you've been applying to many more countries in the world. And a follow-up question I'd like to ask you before moving on is the economic impact, James, because clearly there's a health issue, there's a health impact, there's a social impact for people in terms of affordability at $1 per pair of glasses. But it means probably that there's a productivity impact into the economy, right? If those people can see better, well, I guess they're going to be more productive and happy in their lives.
So that's actually the second part of the journey, if I may. So coming out of Rwanda, right? As you said, you would think, vision for a nation. We had this unexpected success in Rwanda. So, let's replicate this, right? Yeah. Except that, and so my fellow trustees at Vision for a Nation said, let's pick another country, Ghana, okay? But then I said in Rwanda, it turned out that my family paid for 85% of the program in Rwanda, okay? And so then I thought about it and said, this is about risk-taking, right? High risk-taking capital. And replication is not risk-taking, right? So I said, you know what, Vision for a Nation, you continue, but I need to do something with most of my capital that is something that will allow this to be spread quickly. Because if we did this one country at a time, it would take 1,000 years to solve the problem. We don't have that time. The issue is urgent, right? And so again, thinking about it from that point of view, I was very lucky again to connect with the director of of marketing and communication at the London Olympics, Greg Nugent, who is a brilliant communicator, and so I told him my story, and he said, you know what, I can help you here, right? And so to cut a long story short, 4 days before the Sustainable Development Goals were launched, were approved by the UN. We placed a quarter-page ad in the New York Times listing all the 17 goals, and we put a big red stamp on it. Oversight. You forgot vision. Okay.
Wow.
Why did we do that? Because Greg's idea is, hey, if you're going to launch a campaign, you have to determine what is winning and what is losing. Okay. And so our metric for winning was we need this issue to be recognized by the global community, right? That this is as important as the 17 sustainable
Yes.
chemicals. Okay. And so how did we do that? We actually then piggyback. So we said, hey, we said, you cannot, if there are, over 2 billion people in the world with uncorrected blurry vision, right?
Yep.
You know, you are not going to be able, as you said, to achieve productivity,
Yeah.
educational outcomes, even
Yes.
gender equality. So there were like 8 of the SDGs that couldn't be
Achieved.
achieved
Yeah.
unless you correct. So we officially became known as the accelerator of the
Yeah.
SDGs, or
An
the golden
enabler, a
thread. Yeah,
catalyst, or an
enabler. Yeah,
accelerator.
yeah,
Yes.
yes,
Wonderful.
right.
Wow.
So, but then we had to prove it, right? So again, very fortunately, we funded a
Impact
a
study.
yeah, no. So a randomized controlled trial of
Okay.
tea pickers in Assam, India. Okay, so there were 750 women who all had
Yep.
blurry vision. So we corrected the vision of half of them. And then through a tea picking season, the ones who had their vision corrected had a 22% average increase in
Yeah.
productivity. Okay. And so that's when the development community had the light bulb went off and said,
The light bulb. Yes.
whoa,
Okay.
yes,
Wow.
okay. Again, it's that light bulb moment, right? And so it's very much that
Love it.
that was the first kind of proof, right?
The
That
proof
this is
point.
this is yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful, wonderful story, Jess. I love the way you went all the way through the philanthropy to what is called social and economic impact, actually, all together. 1% at a time, one pair of eyes at a time across the world. It's actually a wonderful example of high scale philanthropy. Uh, in another episode of the podcast, I hosted someone you may know or not, Jacqueline Novogratz, is the
Yes,
head of
I do know
Acumen.
her.
You know
Yes,
Jacqueline?
yes,
Yeah,
she's a lovely
she's a
lady. Yeah,
wonderful. Yeah,
she's also
she's a wonderful.
Catholic. We had
She's
to
a
talk
wonderful.
about that. Yeah.
She's a wonderful leader, and she's very, very much in love with what is called patient capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Investing entrepreneurs with a long-term perspective to basically tackle systemic poverty. And she spoke about the importance of dignity in every human
Yeah.
being's journey and how her work creates opportunity for those often overlooked. Your foundation campaigns also focus on empowering people through vision correction and early literacy, as we discussed, right? So, how does the concept of dignity play a role in your initiative? And how do you approach the challenge of making long term investments in societal change, similarly to Jacqueline's philosophy?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, it's it with I think it's so important that we treat everyone with dignity, right? It doesn't matter whether you are in a in a very poor part of Africa or South
Yeah.
America, right? Right? What we found very early on was, for example, with the glasses, if you have ugly glasses, it doesn't matter how poor people are, they're not going to wear it. Okay.
Yes.
And so it's so much of the work is around this idea. That's why it's also about asking people, saying you have an eye problem. Here's a pair of glasses, but you have to pay for it, right? Because if you don't pay something for it, right? And what we pay, $1.50 in Rwanda at the time was equivalent to 2 weeks of the average disposable income, right, of
Yes.
the Rwandan. And so they had to think clearly: is this important enough for me that I would pay that and have this, right, right? And some people decided not to, which is fine, But that's the
Yes.
dignity. It's not us saying, oh, you must have it because we know better, right?
It's
No,
people
because
choice.
you might just say, I really don't need to see clearly, and
Yep.
I'd rather use that money for some other purpose, right? Which is
Yes.
legitimate. It shouldn't be something that we impose upon them. And so
Yeah.
I think that one of the key things of ways of making a program, successful and scalable is to
Yes.
make sure that, you're doing it, not that you're prescribing to them, but you are understanding what it is that their
Yes.
circumstances and respectful of that.
Yes. No, I like it. It's absolutely fair and clear, I think, James. I think it's all about, again, the way you connect a high scale, initiative with a touch, which is really one person at a time, and the way you do it very personally in a human way as well. Because I think, to me, this is part of the philanthropic experience as well. So I'm also myself at a much different scale, of course, James, the founder of foundation and philanthropist, and I'm always interested in discussing different schools of thought on philanthropy. So I like to go back to the moonshot philanthropy. I've been also involved in different types of efforts called venture philanthropy. There's a new school, kind of new school, I would say, which is controversial as well, called effective altruism, that I'm sure you heard about. So how would you position the moonshot philosophy and the way you manage your philanthropy compared to venture philanthropy, traditional philanthropy, or maybe effective altruism?
Yeah, so I think that I would even broaden that to say,
Yeah.
traditionally one of the key reasons why I'm very passionate now about talking about this is that I find that, the people or high net worth, who have the ability to make a difference with not only their capital but with their time, right?
Yes.
Traditionally it's been about writing checks. It goes back to
Right.
my beginning, and why I feel I owe so much to my father was because it wasn't just about writing the check. It was about rolling up your sleeves and trying to figure things out, right? And so this is something that I feel very strongly about, that so much of people who quote philanthropists, what they're really doing is what I would term charity or patronage, right? And charity today is different because in the old days, so in the Chinese culture, you were always expect, as a wealthy person in the community, you're always expected to be charitable, okay?
Yeah.
Right, to your fellow community, right? But the world's changed, and today that is the job of governments to do that. Okay, they're the ones who deliver that. Okay, and so really, where we as the high net worth can really make a difference is to explore those edges of the difficult problems, right?
Yes.
The ones that are hard to solve, right? And there are so many, as we know today, aside from the sustainable development, climate change,
Of course.
pollution, so many issues, right? And to make progress in that is really going to take, I believe, people with the financial circumstances to then commit this high risk capital, right, over a prolonged period of time, make mistakes, right, learn from the mistakes, and you then develop that domain expertise to be able to make a difference. So this sits in that spectrum, of ways to do philanthropy, and there's no right or wrong. I think every high net worth should have, should say, hey, what resonates with me? And probably they would start, at maybe one end, or, start to write checks. But over time, hopefully they will develop an understanding and then explore their own passions to find something that they can then really sink their teeth into and go on these moonshot journeys, right? And so it sits in, so I would say charity, patronage is on one end of the spectrum, moonshot philanthropy at the other end.
Yes.
But whether you'd go on a moonshot journey or not, the key learning is, I think as a high net worth, right, we should devote some part of our, surplus capital to risk-taking philanthropy. Okay. To, and that's the part. If you ask the average or most wealthy families today, they would say, how much do you take with it? And if they looked at it, probably very little, sub 1%, right? So if we can increase that risk-taking capital to 1, 2, 5, 10%, I think that's going to create a very big change in the world. Like your old boss is, of course, my hero. Bill Gates. If not for him and what he did with malaria, I probably wouldn't have gone on the journey, nor would I have have persevered on that journey. But seeing him to keep pounding at it, away at it, is something that inspired me to continue despite all the
Yeah,
difficulties.
yeah, it's so true, and yes, indeed, Bill has been someone really leading the way, and with the giving pledge as
Yeah.
well, and showing many
Yes.
ways to bring
Yeah.
not
But
just money, but bring his own energy,
yeah,
network, intensity
yes.
into
But
helping to
you
crack
know,
some of the toughest
but when
problems of
I
the world.
when I talk to people about risk taking philanthropy, they say, but he's the richest man in the world. Of course he can. We're only mere centimillionaires or billionaires. We don't have the resources to do that, which is not true. I am not a billionaire, but I've been able to do this
Yes.
journey in whether in vision or early child literacy, and made I think some significant progress, right? And it is not about the amount of money, but it's about thinking about it from a different way, about high risk taking on the available capital.
Super clear, James, what moonshot philanthropy is all about. Now, I'd like to shift gears, talk for the last part of the podcast, last few questions on leadership and thought leadership. In addition to focusing again on early child literacy vision, the foundation has the ambition to support others on their own philanthropic journey through thought leadership. So, what is thought leadership about for you? And as a leader with a global footprint and a global citizen, as you said, what does positive leadership means to you? Because that's, as you know, the core theme of the podcast, being a
Yeah.
positive leader. What does it mean for you, James?
Well, I think the positive leadership in my definition is quite simple, right? You know, it goes back to my phrase that you mentioned. You know, what I'm honored to do is to privatize failures and to socialize successes, right?
Hmm.
And it came about, that phrase came about because, as you recall from the global financial crisis, one of the
Yes.
big complaints was that particularly financial institutions were socializing failure and privatizing successes, right?
Right.
Right. And so to me, positive leadership is we in the high net worth community being able to say, you know what, let's turn this around. We have the means to really make a difference, right? And we can. And, hopefully, Bill's an amazing example. There are many others. We're working on coming up with some other examples. There are actually many throughout history as well as current day, right? To be
Yeah.
able to show that this is not, just, a crazy thing to do. This is a very important and legitimate thing for high net worth families and individuals to partake on.
Yes, love it. It's a wonderful quote. It's going to be one of my favorite quotes on passive leadership. Moving on the way forward, James. Now, last couple of questions. Right now, actually, as we record this podcast together, James, what is top of your mind? What are the key core challenges that you're focusing on, both personally, professionally, that maybe keeps you awake at night when you're traveling somewhere on a plane? What is on your mind, James?
Well, I mean, it is, you can't help but see, that certainly, climate change, and there's so many, the poly crisis, right? There's so many
Yeah.
intertwined issues, right, that need to be solved. And nobody can solve all of them, right? But I think if that high net worth community can have the people who have the passion to solve particular pieces of it. Like, for example, I have a good friend, Richard Lawrence, and his wife, Dee Lawrence. They're working on climate change, on methane emissions, right? And they're a world authority on that now, right? And again, we, whether it's Richard or myself, we fund this, right? And we develop domain expertise, but actually, as important is that we develop our network, right? When I started in Vision, I knew nothing about the vision issue other
Yes.
than the fact that I needed glasses, right? But today I'm considered a domain expert, particularly in the issue of access to vision in the developing world, right? And so this is something that is doable, right? And it's something that is not only it's also very personally rewarding,
Yes.
but also I think it's something that we don't have a choice. We're the only the key here is that because the high net worth community, we're the owners of capital, right? So we can make decisions on spending the capital. Institutional capital like World Bank or governments or even corporates are constrained. They have career risk, they have risk aversity. It's
Yeah.
a reputation of the institution to consider, right? But if something we think is right, is worth trying to do, we can commit the capital to do it and learn from whether it's a failure or success, right? And that is the key, is being able to deploy risk capital, right?
No, it's a wonderful, again, both learning of your life, I think, James, and something that can be certainly used by many others. Now, looking back at your journey, if you could select a couple of moments, right, that stand out as pivotal to your growth as a leader leading all the initiatives we discussed together, what is this one or two moments that you like to share with us, and what are the key lessons, I would say, you took away from that?
Well, my wife says, for me, the key to my success is probably that I don't have much of an ego. That
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 helps always.
I come from something and say, I really don't know, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to commit capital to learn, right? And I learn from failure, from success, right? And then just to keep pushing the ball forward. And I think that's one of the key things. And then again, it's you know this is a very common saying, right? But bring people who are smarter than you around you, right?
Yes.
And that clearly is been something working. If you ask me today, what's the difference between hyperopia and myopia? Frankly, I still don't know to give you a good answer to that. But I
Yes.
got a guy who worked with me for 15 years
As
who
an
really
expert.
knows, who's an expert on that. And we work together so closely that there's a trust, there's a relationship there, that he
Yes.
knows what it is that I'm looking for. I can trust him to give me
Yes.
an honest answer, right? Right.
Yes.
And I think that's the key
Hmm.
to leadership, is to develop, that people can see that, you trust them, and you
Yeah.
really have the humility. You're the servant leadership, I guess, is
Yes.
really kind of the way
Yes.
that I do it. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. My very last question, James, because I know you've been very patient and after traveling somewhere in the world,
Yeah.
uh, if you could give one piece of advice to young leaders across the world listening to the podcast who are aspiring to create a lasting change, right, through their lives, and to combine purpose with impact again in their careers, in whatever initiative they want to take on their life, what would be that one advice to finish that episode together?
Again, it's going to sound like I keep repeating same, but it's about taking risks, right? I think as a young person today, right, if you are in the position, to take some risk, and it could be that, when you're young, early in your career, you want to be focusing on raising a family and building your
Mhm.
financial stability and so forth. But you may come to a point in time where you're able to then step out and take that risk, right? And I very much highly recommend that, right? And gosh, there's a program, one young world, right?
Okay.
I don't know if you've spoken to them, but they've been encouraging and energizing young
Yes.
people early in their careers to think beyond just their own career, to think about where's their role in the world today, right? And that's exactly the type of a way to think. You may not be in a position today to deploy capital, to
Yes.
to do all these things, right? But if you start young and start to learn, you'll be ahead of the curve. By the time you're ready in your maybe late 30s, 40s, you're ready. You've got a lot of domain expertise already to move forward on.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful way to close that session, James. It's all about understanding the why we're here, actually, whatever is our age on this planet, Earth, and shaping our own mission, right, in life, in many dimensions, and of course, make it as meaningful, impactful as possible to bring something back to the world as much as the world is bringing a lot back to us every day. So, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your own story, insights along the journey with us. Your dedication to creating a world where everyone can see clearly is truly inspiring. And I cannot resist reading this wonderful quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "The eyes are the windows to the soul." I love that quote. And I'd like now to really thank our listeners. And if you found this episode, again, impactful, feel free to share it with your friends. And of course, don't forget to leave a review and a rating, a 5 stars is possible if you love it, and some on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, other platforms. And always appreciate again you listening. Until next time, stay again inspired and lead with purpose. Thanks so much.